Millionaire was celebrating the greatest achievement of his career, surrounded by luxury and applause. But everything changes when a hungry girl appears and asks for the rest of the food on his plate. He follows her into an alley, and what he finds changes his life completely. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The evening light cascaded through the floor-to-ceiling windows of 11 Madison Park, transforming the white tablecloths into canvases of amber and gold. Alexander Reed, tech billionaire and founder of Horizon Technologies, sat alone at his table overlooking Madison Square Park. At 52, he had the polished appearance of a man who had spent decades cultivating an image of success. Perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, the precise amount of silver at his temples, and eyes that rarely betrayed emotion. Tonight was supposed to be celebratory. The Pentagon contract, worth $4.3 billion, had finally been signed after 18 months of negotiations. His executive team had insisted on dinner at the 3 Michelin-star restaurant, but Alexander had dismissed them after the appetizers. He preferred solitude, even in victory. "Would you care for another glass of the Chateau Margaux, Mr. Reed?" The sommelier appeared at his elbow, deferential and practiced. "No." Alexander paused, then softened his tone. "Thank you, but I'm fine." The sommelier nodded and retreated. Alexander returned to contemplating his barely touched main course. The duck breast with huckleberries was artfully arranged, the sort of dish that would have garnered thousands of likes on social media. He couldn't taste it. Food had become merely functional years ago, just like sleep, just like most human interactions. His phone vibrated. A message from Claire, his chief operations officer. "The team landed in Tokyo, preparations for the Asian expansion on schedule. Congratulations again on today, eh? You've changed the game." Alexander didn't reply. He'd changed many games over 25 years. The facial recognition software that revolutionized security systems, the predictive algorithms that transformed online retail, the artificial intelligence platform that now powered defense systems across 3 continents. Yet each victory felt increasingly hollow, each achievement merely a stepping stone to the next. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversation of New York's elite. Investment bankers, fashion executives, old money and new, all cocooned in the warm glow of privilege. Alexander gazed out the window, his attention caught by movement. A girl stood on the sidewalk outside, perhaps 11 or 12 years old, staring at the diners through the glass. Unlike the well-heeled pedestrians rushing past, she remained still, watching. Something about her stillness unsettled him. She wore jeans and a faded blue hoodie that seemed too large for her slight frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, but it was her eyes that held him, direct, unblinking, with an intensity that seemed at odds with her age. Alexander looked away, signaling for the check. When he glanced back, the girl had disappeared. He felt a curious mixture of relief and disappointment. As he signed the credit card slip, adding a tip that exceeded most people's weekly grocery budget, movement at the entrance caught his attention. The girl had somehow made it inside and was speaking quietly to the maitre d'. The man's expression shifted from professional cordiality to barely concealed discomfort. He shook his head firmly. The girl persisted, her posture neither demanding nor submissive but determined. Before Alexander fully registered his own intentions, he found himself standing, walking toward them. "Is there a problem?" His voice carried the authority of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. The maitre d' straightened. "No problem at all, Mr. Reed. I was just explaining to this young lady that we don't allow solicitation in the restaurant." "I wasn't begging," the girl said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I just asked if I could have the leftovers people don't eat." Alexander studied her. Up close, he could see the shadows beneath her eyes, the 2 sharp angles of her cheekbones. But there was something else, a composure, a dignity that transcended her circumstances. "How did you get in here?" he asked. "Through the door," she answered simply, with no hint of sarcasm. Despite himself, Alexander felt the corner of his mouth twitch. What's your name? Lily. Lily Carter. Well, Lily Carter, I happen to have hardly touched my dinner. Would you like it? The maître d' looked horrified. Mr. Reed, perhaps we could have something prepared for... That won't be necessary. Alexander's tone ended the discussion. Please have my meal packaged to go. When the carefully wrapped container arrived, Alexander handed it to Lily. She accepted it with a nod that somehow conveyed both gratitude and equality. Thank you, she said, tucking the package carefully into her worn backpack. Aren't you going to eat it? He asked, surprised. Not now. Her eyes met his briefly before she turned toward the door. Alexander settled his bill and stepped out into the evening air. The city had transformed in the minutes he'd spent inside. The golden hour, giving way to the electric blue of early night, streetlights flickering to life. He looked for Lily, but didn't see her among the bustling pedestrians. On impulse, he turned right instead of left, walking against the flow of commuters heading for the subway. Something, curiosity perhaps, or a long-dormant instinct, propelled him forward. He caught a glimpse of the blue hoodie half a block ahead and quickened his pace. Lily moved with purpose, navigating the streets with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. She turned down a quieter side street, then another, leading them away from the glittering avenues into a neighborhood where the buildings grew shabbier, the sidewalks less maintained. Alexander maintained his distance, aware of how strange his behavior would appear to anyone observing. A wealthy man in a $1,000 suit following a child through increasingly unfamiliar streets. But he couldn't turn back now. Lily paused at an alley between two brick apartment buildings, glancing around quickly before slipping into the shadows. Alexander hesitated, then followed. The narrow passage opened into a small courtyard littered with discarded furniture and overflowing garbage cans. In the far corner, a makeshift shelter had been created using a tarp stretched between a dumpster and the building wall. Lily knelt before the shelter, gently pulling aside the tarp. "Emma, I'm back. I brought food." Alexander remained in the shadows, watching as Lily carefully removed the restaurant container from her backpack. From within the shelter, he heard a weak cough. "Can you sit up?" Lily's voice had changed, softened with concern. "You need to eat something, Em." A smaller figure emerged partially from the shelter, a girl perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with the same dark hair as Lily, but a much frailer appearance. Her face was flushed, her movements sluggish. "Not hungry," the younger girl mumbled. "Just a little bit," Lily insisted, opening the container to reveal the expertly prepared meal. "Look, it's fancy food, like in those cooking shows Grandma used to watch." The mention of their grandmother seemed to rouse the younger girl slightly. She allowed Lily to help her into a sitting position, leaning heavily against her sister. "Remember that story Grandma always told?" Lily said, carefully cutting a small piece of duck with a plastic fork. "About the magic feast that could cure any illness?" The younger girl nodded weakly. "Well, maybe this is magic food." Lily held the fork to her sister's lips. "Just try." Alexander stepped forward involuntarily, his shoes scraping against the concrete. Lily whirled around, instantly on guard. When she saw him, her expression hardened into something between fear and defiance. "Why did you follow me?" she demanded, positioning herself protectively in front of her sister. Alexander raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. What could he say? That he'd been compelled by something he couldn't name. "I was concerned." Lily's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "We don't need anything from you." The younger girl coughed again, a deep rattling sound that seemed to shake her entire body. Alexander looked at her with growing alarm. "She needs a doctor," he said. "We can't afford..." "A doctor," Lily replied, her voice flat. "I can." Lily studied him, weighing her options with a calculation beyond her years. Behind her, Emma swayed slightly, her eyes unfocused. "Why would you help us?" Lily asked. Before Alexander could answer, Emma slumped forward. Lily caught her, panic flashing across her face. "Emma!" She turned to Alexander, desperation replacing suspicion. Something's wrong. She's burning up. Alexander crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, kneeling beside the girls. Emma's forehead was hot to the touch, her breathing shallow. "We need to get her to a hospital right now," he said, already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." As he dialed, he looked at Lily, whose tough exterior had cracked to reveal the frightened child beneath. In that moment, Alexander felt something shift inside him, a door opening to a room he'd kept locked for decades. "It's going to be okay," he told her, surprised to find he meant it. "I promise." The harsh, fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency department cast everyone in the same sickly pallor. Alexander paced the waiting room, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. He'd made several calls, to his personal physician, to the hospital's chief of pediatrics, to anyone who might expedite Emma's care. Money and influence cleared paths that would remain blocked to others, a reality he'd long ago accepted without question. Lily sat rigidly in a plastic chair, her backpack clutched to her chest like armor. She hadn't spoken since the ambulance arrived, answering the medical staff's questions with nods or single words. Her eyes never left the double doors through which they'd taken her sister. "They're giving her antibiotics," Alexander said, breaking the silence. "Dr. Matthews is one of the best pediatric specialists in the city." Lily's gaze remained fixed on the doors. "What happens after?" "After? After she gets better, what happens to us?" Her voice was carefully controlled, each word measured. Alexander hesitated. He hadn't thought beyond this moment, this crisis. "Do you have any relatives we could contact?" "No." The finality in her tone discouraged further questions. A young doctor pushed through the double doors, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Reed, could I speak with you for a moment?" Alexander glanced at Lily. "Will you be all right here for a minute?" She nodded without looking at him. In the hallway, the doctor's expression was professionally neutral. "Emma has pneumonia, quite advanced. We've started her on IV antibiotics and respiratory support. She's severely malnourished, which has compromised her immune system." "But she'll recover," Alexander pressed. "With proper treatment, yes. But Mr. Reed," the doctor lowered his voice, "as a mandated reporter, I'm obligated to contact Child Protective Services. These children appear to be homeless, and there are signs of long-term neglect." Alexander nodded. "I understand. But before you make that call, I'd like to speak with the girls. There may be circumstances we're not aware of." The doctor seemed skeptical but agreed. "Emma needs rest now. You can speak with the older girl, but I'd advise keeping it brief." When Alexander returned to the waiting room, Lily was gone. Panic surged through him as he scanned the area, then subsided when he spotted her small figure at a vending machine in the corner. She was staring at the illuminated display of snacks, one hand pressed against the glass, the other clutching a $1 bill so worn it was nearly translucent. Alexander approached slowly. "Are you hungry?" Lily startled slightly, then straightened her shoulders. "I'm fine." "Emma is going to be okay," he said. "She has pneumonia, but they're treating it." Relief flashed across Lily's face, quickly replaced by wariness. "When can I see her?" "Soon, she's resting now." Alexander gestured to the vending machine. "While we wait, why don't we get something to eat?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. Alexander fed several bills into the machine. "Choose whatever you want." She selected a package of peanut butter crackers and a chocolate bar, accepting them with a quiet, "Thank you." They found seats in a quieter corner of the waiting room. "Lily," Alexander began carefully, "the doctors need to know more about your situation. They're concerned about you and Emma." She unwrapped the crackers with deliberate movements. "What did you tell them?" "Just that I found you and brought you here, but they'll have questions about your parents, where you live." Lily broke a cracker in half, studying it as if it contained answers. "Our mom left 3 years ago, just didn't come home one day." "And your father?" "He tried, for a while." She ate the crackers slowly. "Then he started taking pills, said they helped with the pain in his back from his construction job, but they made him different." He'd sleep for days, then be up all night, talking fast about big plans that never happened. Alexander listened, recognizing the signs of opioid addiction. We were okay when Grandma was alive, Lily continued. She took care of us when Dad couldn't, made sure we went to school, had food. What happened to your grandmother? Lily's expression clouded. She got sick last winter. Her heart. The doctors said she needed surgery, but we didn't have insurance anymore. Dad had lost his job by then. She fell silent, the rest of the story hanging unspoken between them. Alexander filled in the blanks. No surgery, no recovery, no grandmother. After the funeral, Dad got worse, started disappearing for days. Then last month, men came and put locks on our apartment door, said we couldn't live there anymore. Where is your father now? Lily shrugged. Don't know, haven't seen him in weeks. She looked up at Alexander, her eyes suddenly fierce. But we're doing fine. I take care of Emma. We're going to be okay. Alexander felt a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. This child had been carrying adult burdens, determined to keep her sister safe in an unsafe world. Lily, I want to help you, he said gently, but the hospital is required to report your situation to Child Protective Services. Fear flashed across her face. They'll separate us, put us in different foster homes. Not necessarily. There are options. That's what they told my friend Zoe, Lily cut in. They said she and her brother would stay together, but they didn't. They never do. Alexander considered his next words carefully. What if I could make sure you and Emma stay together? Suspicion replaced fear. How? I have resources, connections. I could arrange temporary guardianship while we look for your father. Lily studied him, her young face showing the calculation of someone who had learned to mistrust. Offers that seemed too good. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. Alexander was saved from answering by a nurse appearing at the doorway. Ms. Carter, your sister is awake and asking for you. Lily was on her feet instantly. Alexander followed as the nurse led them down a corridor to a private room. Emma lay in a bed that seemed too large for her small frame, an IV in her arm and an oxygen tube beneath her nose. Her face brightened when she saw her sister. Lily. Her voice was weak but relieved. Lily rushed to the bedside, taking Emma's hand. Hey, Squirt, how are you feeling? Better. They gave me medicine. Emma's gaze shifted to Alexander, hovering in the doorway. Who's that? That's Mr. Reed. He helped us get here. Lily's explanation was simple, avoiding complications. Emma studied him with curious eyes. Thank you, she said softly. Alexander nodded, unexpectedly moved by the child's gratitude. You're welcome, Emma. A small silver pendant hung around Emma's neck, glinting in the hospital lights. She noticed Alexander looking at it and held it up proudly. It was Grandma's. Lily has one too. Lily pulled an identical pendant from beneath her hoodie. Grandma gave them to us before she swallowed, before she went away. May I? Alexander asked, stepping closer. Lily hesitated, then nodded. Alexander gently examined the silver oval locket. It was a simple piece, well worn, but cared for. Lily clicked it open to reveal a small photograph of an elderly woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Alexander froze, the breath leaving his body in a sudden rush. The face in the photograph, older, lined with years but unmistakable, belonged to Eleanor Baker. Your grandmother, he whispered. Her name was Eleanor? Lily looked up sharply. How did you know that? The room seemed to tilt around Alexander. He steadied himself against the bed rail. Because she saved my life. Confusion crossed Lily's face. What are you talking about? Alexander's mind raced back 35 years to a storefront library in the Bronx where a woman named Eleanor Baker ran an after-school program for neighborhood children. Where a 12-year-old Alexander Reed, then Alex Reyes, the son of a single mother working 3 jobs, found refuge among books and the kindness of a librarian who saw potential in a troubled boy. Your grandmother, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. ran the New Horizons reading program in the Bronx in the 1980s. Recognition dawned in Lily's eyes. Grandma's library. She always talked about it. She taught me to read, really read, not just words on a page, but ideas, possibilities. Alexander's carefully constructed composure was cracking. When my mother got sick, Eleanor made sure I had somewhere to go after school. She helped me apply for scholarships. His voice faltered. She changed everything for me. Emma looked between them, confused but sensing the importance of the moment. Grandma knew Mr. Reed. It seems she did, Em. Lily's voice was cautious, but her eyes remained fixed on Alexander's face, searching for truth. Alexander pulled out his phone, fingers trembling slightly as he navigated to a rarely viewed photo album. He found what he was looking for, a digitized version of an old Polaroid showing a teenage boy with a serious expression standing beside a middle-aged Eleanor Baker in front of a shelf of books. He handed the phone to Lily. "That's Grandma," she whispered, tracing the image with her finger. "And that's you?" Alexander nodded, unable to speak. The coincidence was too profound, too improbable. Yet here they were, Eleanor Baker's granddaughters, alone and struggling, just as he had been. And somehow, through the chaotic randomness of life in a city of millions, their paths had crossed. Lily looked up from the phone, her expression a complex mixture of wonder, suspicion, and the first tentative hint of hope. "Why didn't you keep in touch with her?" she asked, the question cutting through pretense. Alexander felt the weight of choices made decades ago, of connections severed in the relentless pursuit of success. "I did for a while. Then I moved to California for college, started my company." He trailed off, the excuses sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Life happened. I lost touch with many people from my past." "She would have been proud of you," Emma said suddenly, her voice small but certain. "Grandma always said books could take you anywhere." The simple statement, delivered with a child's directness, struck Alexander with unexpected force. Had Eleanor known what had become of the boy she'd helped? Had she followed his meteoric rise in the tech world? Had she tried to reach out? The questions remained unasked as a doctor entered the room, bringing them back to the present crisis. But as the physician explained Emma's treatment plan, Alexander made a silent vow to the woman in the locket. He would not fail her grandchildren as he had failed her. 3 days after Emma's admission to the hospital, Alexander sat in his office at Horizon Technologies' Manhattan headquarters, staring at his untouched coffee. Through the wall of windows, the city sprawled before him, a landscape of glass, steel, and concrete that he had conquered but never truly claimed as home. His executive assistant, Vanessa, stood in the doorway with a concerned expression. "Your 10 a.m. with the Defense Department has been waiting for 15 minutes, Alex." Alexander blinked, pulled from his thoughts. "Reschedule it." "This is the 3rd time this week. They're getting impatient. Then they can take their business elsewhere." His tone left no room for argument. Vanessa hesitated. "The board is asking questions about your absence from the Tokyo launch, about the meetings you've cancelled. Tell them I'm handling a personal matter." "For how long?" Alexander looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "For as long as necessary." After Vanessa left, Alexander turned to his computer, where he'd spent hours researching temporary guardianship laws in New York State. The process was complex, but not impossible with the right legal team. He'd already spoken with his personal attorney, setting things in motion. His phone buzzed with a text from the private nurse he'd arranged to stay with Emma. "She's asking for her sister again." Alexander checked the time. Lily would be finishing the placement tests he'd arranged at Westside Preparatory Academy, an exclusive private school that had agreed, after a substantial donation, to consider mid-semester admission for both girls once their situation stabilized. His driver would be bringing Lily to the hospital soon. In the 3 days since that first night, Alexander had secured a suite at the Four Seasons for them, while he prepared more permanent arrangements. Lily had accepted these developments with cautious pragmatism, neither fully trusting nor openly rejecting his help. Alexander closed his laptop and stood. The Pentagon contract, the Asian expansion, the quarterly earnings report, all the urgent matters that had consumed his existence just days ago now seemed distant, unimportant, compared to the welfare of Eleanor Baker's grandchildren. As he gathered his coat, Claire appeared in his doorway. His COO's expression was a mixture of concern and irritation. "Alex, we need to talk." "Not now, Claire. I have somewhere to be." "Yes, now." She stepped into the office, closing the door behind. "Sir, the board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. They're concerned about your recent behavior." "My behavior?" Alexander's voice cooled. "I founded this company. I own controlling interest. My behavior is not the board's concern." "It is when you disappear for days without explanation, miss. Critical meetings and jeopardize partnerships we've spent years building." Claire softened her tone. "Alex, what's going on? This isn't like you." Alexander considered how much to share. Claire had been with him since the early days, one of the few people who knew something of his background. "I'm helping someone." Two someones, actually. Children. Claire's eyebrows rose. "Children? Whose children?" "Eleanor Baker's grandchildren." Recognition flickered in Claire's eyes. She was one of the few people who knew about Eleanor's role in Alexander's youth. "They're alone," he continued. "Their grandmother passed away last year. Their mother abandoned them. Their father is—" He paused. "Absent." "And you're what? Playing social worker?" Claire's practical nature asserted itself. "Alex, there are agencies for this, professionals. Who would separate them?" Alexander cut in. "Who would process them through a system that's already overwhelmed? Who would make them statistics instead of children?" Claire studied him. "So, what's your plan? Temporary guardianship? For now, while I locate their father. And if you can't find him? Or if he's unfit?" Alexander hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. "Then I'll figure out the next step." Claire sighed. "The board won't like this distraction." "The board doesn't need to know the details. Tell them I'm handling a personal matter related to my past. It's the truth." After Claire left, Alexander texted his driver to meet him downstairs. He needed to be at the hospital when Lily arrived from her testing session. The private room in Mount Sinai's pediatric wing had transformed over the past 3 days. Colorful artwork now adorned the walls. Prints Alexander had ordered from the MoMA gift shop after noticing Emma's fascination with a book of modern art. A small collection of stuffed animals perched on the windowsill, and a tablet loaded, with games and educational apps sat on the bedside table. Emma's condition was improving steadily. The IV antibiotics were working, her fever had broken, and her appetite was returning. The haunted look in her eyes was fading, replaced by a child's natural curiosity and resilience. She brightened when Alexander entered. "Mr. Reed, look what Nurse Jen helped me make." She proudly held up a string of colorful paper cranes. "Very impressive," he said, genuinely admiring the careful folds. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. The doctor said maybe I can go to the hotel tomorrow if I keep getting stronger." "That's excellent news." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I've never stayed in a hotel before. Lily says the one we're going to has a swimming pool on the roof." Alexander smiled. Despite her initial wariness, Lily had begun sharing his plans. With Emma, a small but significant sign of growing trust. "Once you're stronger, perhaps you can learn to swim," he suggested. Emma's eyes widened. "Really? I've always wanted to swim. Grandma said she'd teach us at the Y, but then she got sick." The casual mention of Eleanor sent a familiar pang through Alexander. So many plans interrupted, so many promises left unfulfilled by her passing. The door opened, and Lily entered, accompanied by Alexander's driver, Marcus. Her expression was guarded, but she managed a small smile for her sister. "Lily," Emma's face lit up. "Mr. Reed says I might go to the hotel tomorrow." "That's great, Em." Lily set her backpack down and gave her sister a gentle hug, careful of the IV line still attached to her arm. She looked at Alexander. "The doctor told me her lungs sound much better." "Yes, he's very pleased with her progress." Alexander nodded to Marcus, who quietly exited. "How was the testing session?" Lily shrugged. "Fine. I guess. The math was pretty easy. I'm sure you did excellently, Alexander said. West Side is a very good school. Both of you would receive an exceptional education there. Lily's expression grew serious. Can I talk to you? Outside? Alexander nodded, surprised by the request. Lily had been polite, but distant with him, answering questions when necessary, but rarely initiating conversation. In the hallway, Lily crossed her arms, her posture defensive. What exactly are you planning to do with us? The directness of the question caught Alexander off guard. I'm trying to help you and Emma stay together, get proper care and education. No, Lily interrupted. What are you really planning? Nobody just takes in two random kids, not even if they knew their grandmother 1,000,000 years ago. Alexander leaned against the wall, considering his response carefully. You're right to be suspicious, Lily. In your position, I would be too. So what's the real deal? You feel guilty about not keeping in touch with Grandma. This is some kind of charity project to make yourself feel better. Her perception was uncomfortably accurate. Alexander decided honesty was the only approach that might work. Perhaps there is some guilt involved, he admitted. Eleanor helped me when I had no one else. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He met Lily's skeptical gaze. But this isn't about assuaging my conscience. This is about doing what's right for you and Emma. And what happens when you get bored with playing hero? When your important business stuff needs your attention again, you'll dump us into foster care and forget all about us. That won't happen, Alexander said firmly. How can I believe that? Adults always make promises they don't keep. The bitterness in her young voice revealed the depth of betrayal she had already experienced. Before Alexander could respond, his phone rang. Claire's number flashing on the screen, he silenced it. I understand why you don't trust me, he said. I haven't earned your trust yet, but I'm asking for a chance to prove that I mean what I say. Lily's skepticism didn't waver. I heard your assistant on the phone yesterday. She said the board of your company is having some emergency meeting about you because of us. Alexander was surprised. Lily had been more attentive than he'd realized. My company will be fine. You and Emma are my priority right now. Until we're not. Lily's words were quiet, but cutting. Before Alexander could respond, a nurse approached with a clipboard. Mr. Reed, could you sign these consent forms for Emma's physical therapy assessment tomorrow? As Alexander reviewed the forms, Lily slipped back into Emma's room. When he finished with the paperwork and rejoined them, the sisters were deep in conversation that stopped abruptly at his entrance. Emma looked troubled, while Lily's expression had hardened. The rest of the afternoon passed in strained silence. Alexander attempted normal conversation, but Lily responded with monosyllables, her earlier openness completely gone. Even Emma seemed affected by the shift, her usual cheerfulness dimmed. That evening, Alexander left the hospital earlier than usual, sensing that Lily needed space. The private nurse would remain overnight, and he would return in the morning to discuss discharge plans for Emma. As his car navigated through Manhattan traffic, Alexander checked his emails for the first time that day. Among the hundreds of messages from Horizon executives and business partners was one from his private investigator. Found information on James Carter. Will call with details. Alexander felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Finding the girl's father was necessary, but it also complicated the situation. If James Carter was located and proven fit, Alexander's role in the girls' lives would likely diminish or end entirely. The thought troubled him more than he expected. Back at his penthouse apartment, Alexander poured himself a rare glass of scotch and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city lights blurred as he became lost in memories of Eleanor Baker and the storefront library that had been his sanctuary. He remembered her patience as she helped him sound out difficult words, her encouragement when he struggled with algebra, her quiet pride when he received his scholarship to Stanford. He remembered promising to stay in touch, to make her proud. And then he remembered the years of increasingly infrequent calls, the holiday cards that became holiday emails that eventually stopped altogether, the invitations to his company launches, that he'd sent but never followed up on. The news of Horizon's success that he'd assumed she must have seen must have connected to the boy she once knew. Had she tried to reach him in her final years? Had she needed help that he, in his isolated tower of success, had been too removed to offer? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The private investigator. "Mr. Reed, I have information on James Carter. He's currently a patient at Riverside, a recovery center in New Jersey. Checked himself in for opioid addiction treatment 6 weeks ago." Alexander felt a surge of complicated emotions. Relief that the girl's father was alive, that he had taken steps toward recovery. Concern about what this meant for Lily and Emma's future. And something else, a reluctance to let go of the responsibility he had assumed. "Is he making progress?" Alexander asked. "According to my source at the facility, yes. He's been following the program, attending therapy. He had a rough start but seems committed now." "Does he know his daughters are essentially homeless?" "He believes they're staying with his late mother-in-law's friend, someone named Susan, but that arrangement apparently fell through months ago, without his knowledge." Alexander thanked the investigator and ended the call. He would need to tell Lily that her father had been found, that he was trying to get better. It might give her hope, ease some of the burden she carried. His phone chimed with a text from the night nurse. "Just checking in. All quiet. Emma sleeping peacefully. Lily reading beside her bed." Alexander texted back his thanks, then prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring decisions about Emma's discharge, the board meeting Claire had warned about, and the question of how to approach James Carter. His last thought before sleep was of Eleanor Baker's kind eyes in the locket photograph. "I'm trying," he whispered to her memory. "I'm trying to make it right." What Alexander didn't know was that at that very moment, Lily Carter was carefully packing essentials into her worn backpack. Clothes for herself and Emma, medications stolen from the nurse's station, food saved from hospital meals. Her expression was resolute, her movements silent and practiced. On a notepad beside Emma's bed, she scribbled a brief message. "We're okay. Don't look for us." Then she gently woke her sleeping sister. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan when Alexander's phone rang, jolting him from a restless sleep. The nurse's panicked voice cut through his grogginess. "They're gone. Mr. Reed, the girls are gone." Alexander was fully alert instantly. "What do you mean, gone?" "I stepped out to speak with the doctor about Emma's discharge papers. When I came back, the room was empty. There's a note. I'll be there in 15 minutes." Alexander was already moving, pulling on clothes, his mind racing through possibilities. Where would they go? How far could Emma travel in her condition? The morning traffic seemed deliberately obstructive as his driver navigated toward Mount Sinai. Alexander made calls to hospital security, to the private investigator, to Marcus with instructions to check the Four Seasons suite where the girl's few belongings had been delivered. At the hospital, a small crisis team had formed. The nurse, Emma's doctor, 2 security officers, and a hospital administrator concerned about liability. Alexander brushed past their questions to read Lily's note. "We're okay, don't look for us." 7 words that somehow contained both defiance and desperation. "Emma's still recovering," the doctor said, his concern professional but genuine. "She shouldn't be without medical supervision yet." Alexander nodded grimly. How much medication did she take? The nurse checked the supply. About 3 days' worth of antibiotics and some pain relievers. "They couldn't have gone far," one of the security officers offered. "We've reviewed the cameras. They left through a service exit around 3 a.m. The older girl was practically carrying the younger one." The image of Lily struggling to support her weakened sister through dark city streets sent a surge of both admiration and fear through Alexander. Such determination, such vulnerability. "I think I know where they might be headed," he said suddenly, remembering a detail from his conversations with Emma. "Their old apartment building in the Bronx. Emma mentioned wanting to get something they left behind, a photo album." "Should we contact the police?" the administrator asked. Not yet, Alexander decided. Let me look first. If they see police, they'll just run again. Back in his car, Alexander directed his driver toward the South Bronx address his investigator had found for the Carter family's former residence. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to the glossy Manhattan world he inhabited. Buildings with peeling paint, security gates over storefront windows, vacant lots where development capital had never materialized. The Carters' old apartment building was a weathered 6-story walk-up. A handwritten "No Trespassing" sign hung on the front door, which stood slightly ajar despite the padlock that should have secured it. "Wait here," Alexander told his driver. "If I'm not back in 30 minutes, call this number." He handed the man his investigator's card. Inside, the building smelled of mildew and disuse. Water damage stained the ceiling, and graffiti marked the walls. Alexander climbed the stairs, guided by the building directory that listed Carter in apartment 4C. The fourth-floor hallway was eerily quiet. Several apartment doors stood open, evidence of hasty evictions or abandonment. 4C was closed, but unlocked. Alexander knocked gently. "Lily, Emma, it's Alexander Reed." Silence. He pushed the door open slowly. The apartment was empty of furniture, but not of evidence that a family had once lived there. Faded rectangles on the walls showed where pictures had hung. In what must have been the girl's bedroom, cartoon. Character stickers decorated a windowsill. Alexander felt a hollow ache seeing these remnants of normalcy. Where had the furniture gone? Sold piece by piece as finances dwindled, seized by the landlord, left behind in a hurried exit. The apartment was clearly empty. Alexander turned to leave when a sound from the bathroom caught his attention, a muffled cough. He approached the bathroom door. "Lily, Emma, I'm alone. I just want to make sure you're both okay." After a moment, the door opened slightly. Lily's face appeared in the gap, wary and exhausted. "How did you find us?" "Emma mentioned wanting to get a photo album from your old apartment." Lily's shoulders slumped. "We shouldn't have come here, but Emma was crying about the pictures of Mom and Grandma." "May I come in?" After a hesitation, Lily opened the door wider. The small bathroom contained Emma, huddled in the bathtub, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, clutching a worn photo album. Her face was flushed, her breathing labored. Alexander knelt beside the tub. "Emma, you should be in the hospital." "Don't make us go back," she whispered. "Lily says they'll separate us." "No one is going to separate you," Alexander promised, meeting Lily's skeptical gaze over her sister's head. "You can't guarantee that," Lily said flatly. "Actually, I can." Alexander maintained eye contact, willing her to believe him. "I found your father." Both girls froze. Emma looked up, hope and fear mingling in her expression. "Dad, where is he?" "He's in a recovery center in New Jersey, getting help for his addiction." Alexander kept his voice gentle but honest. "He's been there for 6 weeks. He's working hard to get you better." Lily's expression hardened. "He left us just like Mom." "He thought you were staying with someone named Susan." "Mrs. Peters," Emma supplied. "She was Grandma's friend. But her son moved in with his family and there wasn't room for us anymore." "Why didn't you tell your father?" Lily's laugh was brittle beyond her years. "We tried. He was either too high to understand or not answering his phone. Eventually it got disconnected." Alexander absorbed this, understanding better why Lily's trust had been so thoroughly eroded. "Your father is sober now, and he's looking for you." This wasn't strictly true. James Carter didn't yet know his daughters had been found, but Alexander would make it true before the day ended. "So what happens now?" Lily demanded. "You hand us over to him and wash your hands of the whole mess." "No," Alexander said firmly. "I help all of you. Your father needs support to maintain his recovery. You and Emma need stability, education, medical care. I can provide those things while your family heals." Emma coughed again, a deep rattling sound that concerned Alexander. "We need to get you back to the doctor," he said gently. To his surprise, Lily nodded. The fight seemed to drain from her as she glanced at her sister's feverish face. Her breathing got worse during the night. "I gave her the medicine, but—" Alexander carefully lifted Emma, who felt frighteningly light in his arms. My car is outside. Let's get her back to the hospital. In the car, Emma dozed against her sister's shoulder while Lily stared out the window, her expression unreadable. Alexander called ahead to the hospital, ensuring Emma's doctor would be waiting. "Why are you really doing this?" Lily asked suddenly, her voice low to avoid waking Emma. The truth this time. Alexander considered deflecting but decided against it. This child had experienced too many adult evasions already. "When I was about your age," he began, "my mother got sick, cancer. She tried to keep working, but eventually she couldn't. We lost our apartment. For a while, we lived in our car." Lily's attention was fully on him now, her surprise evident. The polished billionaire before her seemed worlds away from the desperate boy he described. "Eleanor, your grandmother, noticed I was wearing the same clothes every day, that I wasn't bringing lunch. She started keeping the library open, late so I'd have a warm place to stay. She brought extra food, claiming she accidentally packed too much." Alexander stared at his hands, remembering. "When my mother had to go into hospice care, Eleanor helped arrange for me to stay with another library volunteer instead of going into foster care. She kept me from falling through the cracks." He looked up, meeting Lily's gaze directly. "I never properly thanked her. I got scholarships, went to college, built my company, and gradually lost touch with the people who helped me when I had nothing, including Eleanor." "Grandma never mentioned knowing some rich tech guy," Lily said, but her tone had softened slightly. "I wasn't rich then, just a scrawny kid with an attitude problem and good test scores." Alexander's smile was tinged with sadness. "By the time I became the person you see now, we'd lost touch. My fault, not hers." The car pulled up to the hospital entrance, where Emma's doctor was waiting with a wheelchair. As medical staff whisked Emma inside, Alexander placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "I'm not trying to replace your father," he said, "or to erase what you've been through. But I made a promise to myself when I recognized your grandmother's photo, that I wouldn't fail her grandchildren the way I failed her." Lily studied him, her young face solemn. "She used to say that everyone deserves a second chance, but not everyone deserves a third." Alexander felt the weight of those words. Wise advice. "This is your second chance," Lily said, her voice suddenly older than her years. "Don't mess it up." Inside the hospital, the staff efficiently readmitted Emma, starting a new round of antibiotics and respiratory treatments. Her condition had deteriorated during the night away, but the doctor was optimistic about her recovery. While Emma was being treated, Alexander took Lily to the hospital cafeteria. She picked at a sandwich, exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. "When can we see Dad?" she asked finally. "Soon," Alexander promised. "I need to speak with his doctors first, make sure the timing is right for his recovery." Lily nodded, seeming to accept this. "Will we stay at that hotel until then?" "If that's what you want, or—" Alexander hesitated. "I have a house in Connecticut, not far from the city. It has a garden, space to breathe. Emma could recover there once she's discharged." "A house in Connecticut," Lily repeated, as if testing how the words felt. "Of course you do." "It's just sitting empty most of the time," Alexander said, feeling oddly defensive. "I rarely have time to go there." "Rich people problems," Lily muttered, but without real malice. Alexander couldn't help but smile. Indeed. A comfortable silence settled between them, the first since they'd met. Lily finished her sandwich, then looked up at Alexander with an expression he couldn't quite read. "That first night," she said, "at the restaurant, why did you follow me?" The question had haunted Alexander himself. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "Something about the way you looked through that window, like you were seeing a different world, one you knew existed but couldn't access." "I just wanted food for Emma," Lily said softly. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Alexander felt the familiar ache of recognition. "I know what that's like. To be responsible for someone when you're still a child yourself. To feel like the whole world is against you. Does it ever go away? That feeling?" The question's raw. Honesty caught Alexander off guard. Did it ever go away? Despite his wealth, his power, his carefully constructed life, some part of him still felt like that hungry boy, nose pressed against the glass, looking in. "Not entirely," he answered truthfully, "but it changes, becomes less sharp, and someday you realize you've built something solid beneath your feet." Lily considered this. "I want that, for Emma especially, something solid." "Then let me help you build it," Alexander said, "for both of you." Before Lily could respond, Alexander's phone rang. The private investigator again. He excused himself to take the call in the hallway. "Mr. Reed, I've spoken with the director at Riverside Recovery. James Carter can receive visitors starting next week. They feel he's made enough progress that seeing his daughters would be beneficial to his recovery." "Excellent. Make the arrangements. And one more thing. I want a complete assessment of his progress, prognosis, and aftercare plans." After ending the call, Alexander returned to find Lily dozing at the table, her head resting on her folded arms. The sight struck him powerfully. This fierce, protective child finally allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. He sat quietly, keeping watch while she slept, thinking about second chances and the strange, circuitous path that had brought Eleanor Baker's influence back into his life when he least expected it. Later, as they walked back to Emma's room, Lily spoke without looking at him. "We'll try the Connecticut house, but if Emma doesn't like it, we go back to the hotel." Alexander nodded, recognizing this for what it was, not full trust but a tentative step toward it. Agreed. Emma was sleeping peacefully when they entered her room, her breathing easier than before. Lily immediately went to her side, gently stroking her sister's hair. "She's responding well to the treatment," the nurse reported. "Her fevers are down and her oxygen levels are improving." Alexander watched the sisters, one sleeping, one keeping vigil, and felt something shift within him. For years he had built his empire on the principle that emotional attachment was a liability, that success required singular focus and ruthless prioritization. Yet in the space of a few days, these children had upended that carefully constructed philosophy. They had reminded him of what Eleanor Baker had tried to teach him long ago, that true wealth wasn't measured in stock options or corporate acquisitions, but in human connections. As he settled into the chair by the window, preparing for another night at the hospital, Alexander realized with startling clarity that he had been given not just a second chance to honor Eleanor's memory, but a second chance at something even more fundamental, his humanity. The Connecticut house was nothing like Lily had imagined. She'd expected something grand and intimidating, a mansion with columns and manicured gardens, the kind she'd seen in movies. Instead, Alexander's country home was a sprawling farmhouse with weathered cedar shingles, surrounded by maple trees, just beginning to show autumn colors. "It's old," Alexander explained as they drove up the gravel driveway, Emma's face pressed against the car window in wonder. "Built in the 1800s, I've renovated the inside but kept the character. It looks like a giant version of the house in Grandma's fairy tale books," Emma whispered, her eyes wide. 2 weeks had passed since the night Lily had tried to run away with her sister. Emma had been discharged from the hospital 3 days ago, with strict instructions for rest and continued medication. Alexander had arranged for a live-in nurse, Mrs. Patel, to assist with Emma's recovery, but the woman wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. Tonight, it would be just the three of them in this house that seemed to exist in a different universe from the cold city streets they'd known. Inside, the farmhouse was a study in understated comfort, wide plank floors, exposed beams, and furniture that invited you to sink into it. No sleek minimalism here, no chrome or glass, just wood, wool, and warmth. "You have a fireplace," Emma exclaimed, immediately drawn to the massive stone hearth in the living room. "A real one, not gas." Alexander smiled. "We can light it tonight if you'd like. It gets cool in the evenings here." Lily moved through the spaces cautiously, as if afraid to touch anything. The kitchen with its expansive island and hanging copper pots, the sunroom lined with bookshelves, the wide staircase leading to the second floor. Everything spoke of permanence, of history, qualities that had been painfully absent from the sisters' lives in recent months. Your rooms are upstairs, Alexander said, leading them up the stairs. I had them prepared, but you can change anything you don't like. Emma's room was painted a soft yellow, with a window seat overlooking the garden. A bookshelf held titles Alexander had selected based on what she'd enjoyed in the hospital. Stories about animals, adventures, and brave girls who saved the day. On the bed sat a stuffed owl, its expression somehow both wise and mischievous. Emma approached it cautiously. Is this for me? Every bed needs a guardian, Alexander said. This one seemed like he was waiting for you. Emma hugged the owl to her chest, her face lighting up with a joy that made Lily's throat tighten. How long had it been since she'd seen her sister truly happy? Lily's room was across the hall, painted a peaceful blue-gray with a desk beneath, the window and a comfortable reading chair in the corner. No stuffed animals, but a laptop sat on the desk, its sleek surface reflecting the afternoon light. I thought you might want to continue your studies, Alexander explained, even before you started Westside. Lily ran her fingers over the laptop's surface, overwhelmed. Their old apartment had had one ancient desktop computer that their father had eventually sold when the bills piled up. Thank you, she managed, the words feeling inadequate. I'll let you both get settled, Alexander said. There are clothes in the dressers, just basics until we can go shopping. Come down when you're ready, and we'll have dinner. After he left, Emma bounced excitedly, from her room to Lily's, opening drawers and closets, exclaiming over each discovery. Lily watched her sister's exuberance with a mixture of happiness and caution. This beautiful house, these thoughtful gifts, they seemed too good to be true. And in Lily's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Lily, look, I have my own bathroom, with the fluffiest towels ever, Emma called from the ensuite bathroom adjoining her bedroom. Despite her reservations, Lily smiled. After months of shelters, friends' couches, and finally the streets, the simple luxury of privacy and clean towels seemed miraculous. That evening they ate dinner at the large farmhouse table, a meal Alexander had prepared himself, explaining that his housekeeper only came twice a week. The revelation that he cooked his own food surprised Lily. She'd assumed billionaires had chefs for that sort of thing. It's a hobby, he explained, serving a simple but delicious pasta with fresh vegetables. Cooking forces me to slow down, to be present. Dad used to cook, Emma said suddenly, before he got sick. He made really good pancakes on Sundays. An awkward silence followed. They hadn't discussed the planned visit to Riverside Recovery Center, scheduled for 3 days from now. Lily had noticed Alexander making calls about it, speaking in lowered tones when he thought they couldn't hear. Your father is looking forward to seeing you both, Alexander said carefully. His doctors say he's making excellent progress. Lily pushed her pasta around her plate. What happens after, when he gets out? Alexander set down his fork. That depends on many factors: his continued recovery, his ability to provide a stable home. He met Lily's gaze directly. My commitment to you both doesn't change regardless of what happens with your father. But you want us to live with him. Eventually, Lily pressed. That's the end goal, right? Fix him, fix us, problem solved? Lily, Emma said softly, distressed by her sister's tone. Alexander considered his response carefully. What I want is for you both to be safe, cared for, and happy. Ideally, that would include your father being healthy and present in your lives. But that's not something anyone can force or rush. Lily looked down at her plate, suddenly ashamed of her outburst. Alexander had done nothing but help them, yet she kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal ulterior motives or limitations to his generosity. I'm sorry, she murmured. No apology needed, Alexander replied. Your questions are valid, your concerns are valid. This situation is complicated. Complicated, Emma repeated, testing the word. Like when you have to carry the one in math problems. The unexpected comparison broke the tension. Alexander laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. Exactly like that, he said, smiling at Emma. Sometimes in life, we have to carry the one. After dinner, Alexander lit the fireplace as promised. Emma curled up on the hearthrug with a book, while Lily explored the bookshelves in the adjoining study. She found herself drawn to a section of classics, many with the same editions her grandmother had owned. She loved Steinbeck, Alexander said, appearing in the doorway. Eleanor, I mean. She made me read The Pearl when I was about your age. Grandma read us Of Mice and Men, Lily said, running her fingers along the book's spine. Dad thought it was too sad for kids, but Grandma said important stories aren't always happy ones. She was right about that. Alexander crossed to a cabinet in the corner, unlocking it to reveal a collection of photo albums. I found these yesterday. I thought you might want to see them. He selected one bound in green leather and handed it to Lily. Inside were photographs from the 1980s, the storefront library where Eleanor had worked. And there, sitting cross-legged on a faded carpet, was a skinny boy with serious eyes, book open on his lap. That's you, Lily said, studying the image. Alexander nodded. 13 years old, already angry at the world. Lily turned the pages, finding more images of the library, of children reading and playing. Eleanor appeared in many photos, younger than Lily had ever known her, but with the same kind eyes and warm smile. I didn't know Grandma worked in a library before we were born, Lily said. She always had books around, but she never talked much about her job there. It wasn't just a job to her, Alexander said quietly. It was a mission. She believed books could save lives. They certainly saved mine. They continued through the album together, Alexander sharing stories about the library, about Eleanor's reading programs and community initiatives. Lily found herself laughing at tales of young Alexander's stubbornness, his initial resistance, to Eleanor's help. You were kind of a jerk, she observed. I absolutely was, Alexander agreed, smiling. I thought accepting help meant admitting weakness. Eleanor taught me otherwise. From her place by the fire, Emma had fallen asleep, book still open on her chest. Alexander carefully lifted her, the owl tucked in the crook of her arm. I'll take her up, he said softly. Lily watched as he carried Emma upstairs with surprising gentleness for a man who commanded one of the largest tech companies in the world. When he returned, he found Lily still looking through the photo album. You should get some rest too, he suggested. It's been a long day. Lily nodded but didn't move. Can I ask you something? Of course. Did you ever find out what happened to your mum after she went into hospice? Alexander's expression softened with old grief. She passed away 3 months later. I was there. Were you scared? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Yes, he admitted. Terrified. I was scared when Grandma died, Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad was too high to really understand what was happening. I had to sign papers I didn't understand. Then they took her away, and the funeral home people kept asking about payment arrangements. Alexander felt a surge of anger at the thought of this child, dealing with such adult burdens alone. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I just keep thinking, what if Dad relapses? What if he can't take care of us? What happens then? Then, you stay with me, Alexander said simply, for as long as you need. Lily looked up, searching his face for signs of insincerity or hesitation. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Okay. Later that night, Alexander sat alone in his study, reviewing emails on his laptop. The board had been appeased for now, thanks largely to Claire's diplomatic skills, but he knew the reprieve was temporary. Sooner or later, he would need to fully re-engage with Horizon's operations or face more serious challenges to his leadership. His phone chimed with a text from Claire. Pentagon called again. Need answer by Friday. Also, Tokyo team asking about your visit next month. Still on. Alexander sighed, typing a brief response promising decisions by tomorrow. The weight of his corporate responsibilities pressed against his new commitments to Lily and Emma. Finding balance would be challenging, but necessary. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Lily stood in the doorway, barefoot in pajamas, too large for her slender frame. Can't sleep? Alexander asked. She shook her head. Too quiet. And the bed is too comfortable. Weird, right? Not weird at all. It takes time to adjust to new surroundings. Lily hovered uncertainly in the doorway. I can go back upstairs if you're working. No, please. Alexander closed his laptop. I could use a break. Would you like some hot chocolate? In the kitchen, they moved in companionable silence. Alexander warming milk on the stove, Lily finding mugs in the cabinet. The domesticity of the scene struck Alexander as both foreign and strangely natural. Do you think Dad will recognize us? Lily asked suddenly, accepting the steaming mug Alexander handed her. Of course he will. It's been almost 2 months, and before that he was different, not really seeing us, even when he was there. Alexander considered his response carefully. Addiction changes people, makes them focus on the substance above all else, even people they love. But from what his doctors tell me, your father is working hard to recover the person he was before. What if that person is gone for good? Then you learn to know the new person he's becoming. Alexander met her gaze. Recovery isn't about going backwards. It's about building something new from what remains. Lily sipped her hot chocolate thoughtfully. Like your house, old bones new inside. Alexander smiled at the apt comparison. Exactly like that. Alexander. It was the first time Lily had used his first name rather than Mr. Reed. Yes? Thank you for everything. The words were simple but delivered with a sincerity that touched him deeply. You're welcome, Lily. 3 days later, Alexander drove them to Riverside Recovery Center. The facility was set on several acres of wooded grounds, the main building a converted mansion with views of the Hudson River. Despite the pleasant surroundings, Lily grew increasingly tense as they approached, her hand gripping Emma's tightly. Remember, this is just a visit, Alexander said gently. Nothing will be decided today. In the facility's visitor lounge, James Carter waited. At 41, he looked older, his face gaunt, his once dark hair streaked with premature grey. But his eyes were clear, alert in a way Lily hadn't seen in years. Dad! Emma broke free from her sister's grip, running across the room. James caught her in a careful embrace, tears streaming down his face. Emma, my little Emma. He looked up, his gaze finding Lily, who remained frozen beside Alexander. Lily. Lily didn't move. Alexander placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, but didn't push her forward. I understand if you're angry, James said, his voice rough with emotion. You have every right to be. We needed you, Lily said, the words barely audible. James nodded, accepting the accusation. I know I failed you both, I can't change that. But I'm fighting to be someone you can count on again. Something in his direct acknowledgement reached Lily. She took a hesitant step forward, then another until she stood before her father. He opened his free arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she allowed herself to be drawn into the family embrace. Alexander watched from a distance, giving the family their moment of reconnection. A counselor caught his eye from the doorway, gesturing for him to step outside. Mr. Carter is doing well, the woman said once they were in the hallway. His commitment to recovery is genuine, but the road ahead is still long. What's the prognosis for family reunification? Alexander asked. Positive, but with caveats. He'll need significant support after discharge. Stable housing, ongoing treatment, employment assistance, and the girls will need their own support system. Alexander nodded. I'm prepared to provide whatever resources are necessary. The counselor studied him curiously. May I ask your relationship to the family? How to explain the complex web of past and present that connected him to the Carters? I'm an old friend of their grandmother, he said simply, and I owe her a debt I can never fully repay. When Alexander returned to the visitor lounge, he found James showing his daughters photographs of the recovery center's gardens, explaining the horticultural therapy program he'd joined. I'm learning to grow vegetables, he was saying. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. Can we see? Emma asked eagerly. With permission from the staff, James led them on a tour of the grounds, pointing out the vegetable beds he tended, the meditation garden where he practiced mindfulness, the workshop where he was learning carpentry skills. Throughout the tour, Alexander observed the family dynamics, Emma's unguarded affection, Lily's cautious re-engagement, James's earnest efforts to connect with both daughters where they were. There was damage here, but also possibility. The foundations for rebuilding existed. Later, as they prepared to leave, James pulled Alexander aside while the girls gathered their things. "Mr. Reed," he began, his voice low, "I don't know how to thank you for taking care of my daughters when I couldn't." "No thanks necessary," Alexander replied. "They're remarkable children, a credit to their grandmother's influence." James nodded, grief crossing his features. "Eleanor was the strongest person I knew when we lost her," he trailed off. "I should have been stronger for the girls." "You're finding that strength now," Alexander observed. "That's what matters. The counselors tell me I shouldn't rush things. That rebuilding trust takes time." James looked over at his daughters. "I want to do this right, for them." "What are your plans after discharge?" Alexander asked. "That's the thing," James admitted. "I'm not sure yet. My old construction job is gone, the apartment too. I have some savings from my 401k, but it won't last long." "I might have a proposition for you," Alexander said, an idea forming. "My property in Connecticut needs a caretaker. Someone with construction experience who could handle maintenance, oversee the grounds. There's a separate guest house on the property." James looked surprised. "You'd trust me with that? After everything?" "Not immediately," Alexander said honestly, "but as a goal to work toward. A stable job, housing, proximity to your daughters, while you continue outpatient treatment. Why would you do this for us?" Alexander considered the question, the same one Lily had asked repeatedly. "Because someone once did something similar for me, and because your daughters deserve to have their father in their lives. A healthy, present father." On the drive back to Connecticut, the girls were uncharacteristically quiet, processing the emotional visit. "Dad looks better," Emma finally said. "Not so scary skinny anymore." Lily nodded. "He seemed more like before, when he talked about the gardening stuff." "He always did like working with his hands," Emma recalled. Alexander listened, offering no commentary. This was their father. Their feelings to navigate. His role was support, not influence. "Do you think he'll really stay better this time?" Lily asked suddenly, her question directed at Alexander. "Recovery isn't linear," he answered carefully. "There may be setbacks, but he has better support this time, and stronger motivation." He met her eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. "And, regardless of his journey, you and Emma will be taken care of. That's a promise." As they pulled into the driveway of the farmhouse, the setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Mrs. Patel, the nurse who had arrived that morning, waved from the porch, where she'd set out a pitcher of lemonade and cookies. Emma ran ahead eagerly, while Lily lingered beside the car with Alexander. "I might be ready to see Dad again," she said quietly. "Not next week, but maybe the week after." Alexander nodded. "I'll arrange it whenever you're ready." Lily looked up at the farmhouse, a place that had begun improbably to feel like home. "Do you think Grandma would be happy about all of this?" Alexander followed her gaze, considering the strange, circuitous path that had led them here, to this moment of tentative healing that honored Eleanor's legacy of compassion and second chances. "Yes," he said simply. "I think she would be very happy indeed." 1 year later, Alexander stood at the edge of the crowded school auditorium, watching as Emma carefully arranged her science project on the assigned table. Her presentation board, meticulously crafted with Lily's help, detailed the growth rates of various vegetables under different light conditions. The experiments had been conducted in the greenhouse James had built on the Connecticut property, a structure that had become Emma's favorite place on the estate. "Nervous?" Alexander asked as Emma adjusted the position of her potted seedlings for the 5th time. "A little," she admitted, "but Dad says being nervous just means you care about doing a good job." Alexander smiled. James's wisdom, once buried beneath addiction, had re-emerged during his recovery. Simple insights that his daughters treasured after years of his absence. "Your father is absolutely right." Alexander straightened his tie, a rare concession to formality for this important event. "And you're going to impress everyone with what you've learned." Emma beamed at him, her health now fully restored, her face filled out from proper nutrition and care. At 9 years old, she was thriving at Westside Preparatory, where both she and Lily had enrolled 6 months ago. The transition hadn't been without challenges, academic gaps to fill, social adjustments to navigate, but both girls had shown remarkable resilience. From across the auditorium, Alexander spotted Lily entering with James. At 13, Lily had begun to shed some of her hard-earned wariness, though she remained more serious than most children her age. Her protective instincts toward Emma had softened as she gradually accepted that other adults could be trusted with her sister's welfare. James nodded in greeting as he approached. The physical transformation in him was striking. Healthy weight, restored, clear eyes, steady hands. He'd been sober for 14 months now, working as the caretaker of Alexander's Connecticut property while taking online courses in sustainable agriculture. "The greenhouse specimens are a hit already," James reported, gesturing to a cluster of teachers examining Emma's plants. "Mrs. Belmont wants to know if we'd help the school start their own growing program." "You should," Alexander said. "Your expertise would be invaluable." James shook his head modestly. "Still learning myself, but I'd be happy to help." The science fair officially opened, with parents and community members filtering through to view the students' projects. Alexander stepped back, giving Emma space to present her findings to the judges when they arrived. He found a quiet corner where he could observe without intruding. "Quite different from board meetings, isn't it?" Claire appeared beside him, elegant as always in a tailored suit. As Horizon's new CEO, she had taken over day-to-day operations 6 months ago when Alexander transitioned to executive chairman, a move that had shocked the business world but freed him to focus on his unexpected new priorities. "Much more interesting," Alexander replied with a smile. "How was Tokyo?" "Productive. The new AI ethics framework was well received." Claire studied Emma's presentation from a distance. "She's got a real scientific mind. The questions she asks are remarkably insightful for her age." "Takes after her grandmother that way. Eleanor was always curious about how things worked." Claire nodded, familiar now with the story of Eleanor Baker and her influence on both Alexander's past and present. "The Eleanor Baker Foundation's first community center opens next month, correct?" "Yes, in the South Bronx where her library used to be." Alexander felt a surge of pride thinking about the project, a state-of-the-art facility that would provide educational resources, meals, healthcare services, and safe spaces for children whose circumstances mirrored his own childhood struggles. The foundation, established 6 months after Alexander had found Lily and Emma, had quickly become his passion project. While he remained involved in Horizon's strategic direction, his creative energy now flowed primarily into developing programs that addressed childhood poverty and family stability, issues he understood from both personal experience and recent immersion. "Will the girls attend the opening?" Claire asked. "They've helped plan it," Alexander replied. "Lily designed the reading room. Emma insists we need a greenhouse on the roof." Claire smiled. "Smart kids. You've done well by them." "Alex." "They've done well by me," he corrected. "I was sleepwalking through life before they crashed into it." A commotion near Emma's table drew their attention. The judging committee had arrived, and Emma was animatedly explaining her methodology. Even from a distance, Alexander could see her confidence, so different from the frail child he'd found in that alley a year ago. Lily stood nearby, pride evident in her posture. She caught Alexander's eye across the room and gave him a small thumbs up. These silent communications between them had become common, a private language of mutual respect and understanding that had developed gradually over months of navigating their unusual family arrangement. "I should mingle," Claire said, sensing Alexander's desire to move closer to Emma's presentation. "The board expects me to report back on our future scientist. They've already earmarked a college fund for both girls, you know." "They didn't have to do that," Alexander said, touched by the gesture from his once skeptical executives. "They wanted to. You've humanized the company, Alex, in ways that matter." Claire squeezed his arm before disappearing into the crowd. As the evening progressed, Alexander watched Emma charming the judges, Lily helping younger students with their presentations, and James engaging earnestly with teachers about the greenhouse program. This tableau of ordinary school night activities, unremarkable to most observers, filled Alexander with a contentment he'd never found in corporate achievements. Later, as they gathered in the parking lot preparing to return to Connecticut, Emma bounced excitedly beside the car, her honorable mention ribbon pinned proudly to her sweater. "Next year I'm going to study soil composition," she declared. "Dad says the Connecticut soil is different from what's in the city." "It is," James confirmed, loading Emma's project materials into the trunk. "Different mineral content. We can take samples to compare." "Can we stop for ice cream?" Emma asked, her scientific ambitions temporarily overshadowed by more immediate desires. "It's a school night," Lily reminded her, automatically slipping into her protective older sister role. "I think tonight deserves a celebration," Alexander suggested, meeting James's eyes over the girls' heads. James nodded his agreement. At the ice cream parlor, they claimed a booth in the corner, Emma and Lily on one side, Alexander and James on the other. The scene struck Alexander with its utter normalcy. A family outing, a small celebration, the ordinary rhythms of life that had been absent from his existence for decades. "I have news," James said as they finished their desserts. I've been accepted to the Sustainable Agriculture Certificate program at the community college. Classes start next month." "Dad, that's awesome," Emma exclaimed. "It's just a certificate program," James said modestly, "but it's a start. Maybe someday I could do more with it. Teaching, consulting for urban gardens." "You should," Lily said firmly. "You're really good at it." The simple encouragement from his daughter brought a flush of pleasure to James's face. The road to rebuilding their relationship had been complicated. Therapy sessions, difficult conversations, gradual rebuilding of trust. But moments like this showed the progress made, the connections re-established. "Actually," Alexander said, "there might be an opportunity to put that knowledge to use sooner than you think. The Eleanor Baker Foundation is planning community gardens at each of our centers. We'll need someone to develop the program, train local volunteers." James looked surprised. "You think I could do that?" "I know you could," Alexander said with certainty. "You've transformed the Connecticut property. The greenhouse is thriving. You have a gift for this work." "It would mean commuting to the city some days," James said thoughtfully. "But I could still keep up with the caretaker duties." "We'd work out the details," Alexander assured him, "if you're interested." James nodded slowly, processing the opportunity. "I am. Very interested." The conversation shifted to other topics: Emma's upcoming school play, Lily's debate team competition, weekend plans. Simple family matters discussed over melting ice cream in a brightly lit shop, remarkable only in how unremarkable they would seem to outside observers. Later that night, back at the Connecticut house, Alexander worked in his study, reviewing foundation proposals. A soft knock at the door revealed Lily, carrying a gift-wrapped package. "Still up?" Alexander asked, checking his watch. "It's late. I wanted to give you this before I forgot again." She placed the package on his desk. "It's been ready for a while, but there never seemed to be the right time." Alexander opened the package carefully, revealing a photo album bound in dark blue leather. The cover bore a simple engraved title, Family. Inside, Lily had carefully arranged photographs chronicling the past year. Emma in her hospital bed surrounded by books, the girls exploring the Connecticut house for the first time, James's arrival at the guest house after his discharge, holiday celebrations, ordinary moments of their evolving life together. Interspersed with these recent images were older photos of Eleanor that Lily had carefully preserved, creating a visual narrative that bridged past and present. "Lily," Alexander said, deeply moved, "this is extraordinary." "Grandma always said, photographs keep memories safe," Lily explained, unusually self-conscious. "I thought we should have a record of how we became whatever we are now. Family," Alexander said simply, echoing the album's title. "Different from most, perhaps, but family nonetheless." Lily nodded, accepting this definition. "There's something else." She turned to the album's final pages, where she'd placed the old photograph of young Alexander with Eleanor at the library, alongside a recent image of Alexander with the girls and James at the Foundation's groundbreaking ceremony. "Full circle," Alexander murmured. Seeing the narrative Lily had constructed, the boy Eleanor had once helped, now extending that same lifeline to her grandchildren and their father. "She would have liked that," Lily said softly. "Grandma always believed in happy endings, even when things seemed really bad." "She was right to believe," Alexander said, "though I prefer to think of it as a happy continuing rather than an ending." Lily considered this distinction. "That's better, actually. Endings always seem sad to me. Even happy ones. Even those," she confirmed, "because they meant the story was over." Alexander smiled at her insight. "And our story is very much still being written." "With lots of chapters left," Lily agreed, yawning despite herself. "Speaking of which, it's time for sleep. You have debate team in the morning." Lily nodded, but lingered in the doorway. "Alexander?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you followed me that night, at the restaurant." The simple statement conveyed volumes, acknowledgement of how their lives had intertwined, appreciation for the changes that had resulted, acceptance of the unlikely bonds formed. "So am I, Lily," Alexander replied. "More than I can express." After she left, Alexander remained in his study, continuing through the photo album. Each image captured a moment of their collective journey, some joyful, some challenging, all part of the unexpected path that had led him back to his humanity. His phone chimed with a message from the Foundation director. Final approval received for the Eleanor Baker Center. "We can announce at next week's gala." Alexander smiled, picturing Eleanor's reaction to the news that a center bearing her name would soon welcome children like the boy she had once mentored. He imagined her practical pride, her immediate focus on how many young minds could be reached, how many lives potentially changed. Outside his window, the Connecticut night was peaceful, stars visible in a way they never were in the city. On nights like this, Alexander sometimes walked the property, marveling at how different his life had become from the driven, isolated existence he had once believed was the price of success. His corporate legacy remained intact. Horizon continued to innovate and thrive under Claire's leadership. But Alexander now measured his worth differently, through metrics Eleanor would have recognized. Kindness extended, second chances offered, lives touched directly, rather than through the removed impact of technology or wealth. In the guest house, across the lawn a light still burned, James likely working on plans for the greenhouse expansion. In the main house, two sisters slept peacefully, their futures no longer precarious, their potential given room to flourish. And in his study, Alexander Reed, once Alex Reyes, the hungry boy outside looking in, closed the photo album with gentle reverence, certain that Eleanor Baker would approve of the family that had formed in her absence, bound together by her enduring influence. 6 months later, the Eleanor Baker Community Center opened its doors in the South Bronx. The modern building stood on the same block where Eleanor's storefront library had once provided refuge to neighborhood children, its architecture designed to be both welcoming and inspiring. On opening day, a line of families stretched down the block, parents hoping to register their children for after-school programs, teenagers interested in the technology lab and college preparation courses, community members curious about the adult education offerings. Inside, the center hummed with activity. In the teaching kitchen, nutritionists demonstrated how to prepare affordable, healthy meals. In the medical clinic, healthcare providers offered free screenings. In the employment resource room, job counselors helped with resumes and interview skills. At the heart of the building was the Eleanor Baker Reading Room, a light-filled space lined with books carefully selected to spark imagination and ambition. Lily had overseen every detail, from the comfortable seating arrangements to the mural depicting Eleanor's favorite literary characters embarking on adventures. On the rooftop, Emma proudly guided visitors through her greenhouse, a space where neighborhood children would learn to grow vegetables, herbs, and flowers. James moved between the raised beds, explaining the sustainable practices incorporated into the design, his passion for the work evident in every gesture. Alexander observed it all from a quiet corner, marveling at how one woman's compassion had created ripples that continued to expand decades after her initial acts of kindness. Eleanor had helped a boy who grew into a man with resources to help others, including her own grandchildren, who were now extending that legacy further still. Quite. Something, isn't it? Claire appeared beside him, having attended the opening as Horizon's official representative. When you told the board you wanted to redirect half your fortune to this foundation, there were serious concerns about your mental state. Alexander laughed. I remember the intervention they attempted. Now they're fighting over who gets to serve on the foundation board. Claire shook her head, amused by the irony. Success has a way of retroactively justifying what others initially saw as madness. Across the room, Alexander watched as Emma enthusiastically explained her greenhouse project to the mayor, while Lily guided a group of wide-eyed children through the reading. Shroom James stood nearby, steady and present, in a way that would have seemed impossible 18 months ago. It's not really about success, Alexander told Claire. It's about purpose. I built Horizon because I wanted to prove something. To myself, to the world. I built this because it matters in a different way. Both matter, Claire observed, but I understand the distinction. A small commotion at the entrance caught their attention. The restaurant owner from 11 Madison Park, the unwitting catalyst for everything that had followed, had arrived with his staff, carrying trays of catered food for the opening celebration. Alexander had tracked him down months ago, sharing the story of how that chance encounter had changed so many lives. The man had been so moved that he'd established a weekly program at his restaurant, preparing meals for community centers serving vulnerable children. Another ripple expanding outward from Eleanor's legacy of compassion. As the day progressed, Alexander found a moment of quiet on the rooftop garden, gazing out over the Bronx neighborhood where his own journey had begun. The city sprawled before him, a complex ecosystem of struggle and possibility, hardship and hope. Lily joined him at the railing, her expression thoughtful. Grandma would have loved this place. She would have, Alexander agreed. Though she might have found it unnecessarily fancy. Lily smiled at that accurate assessment of her practical grandmother. The important part is what happens inside, the lives that change. Like ours, Alexander said softly. Lily nodded, her gaze traveling to where Emma was teaching a group of children how to plant seedlings, James standing proudly nearby. I used to think happy endings only happened in Grandma's books. That real life was just about surviving, getting through each day. And now? Alexander prompted. Now I think maybe the books had it right all along. Lily turned to him, her expression open in a way that still seemed miraculous given all she had endured. Sometimes the right person follows you home from a restaurant, and everything changes. Alexander felt the weight of those words, the acknowledgement of their unlikely journey from strangers to family, from crisis to community. Sometimes, he agreed, we find exactly what we need when we least expect it. Below them, the center continued its first day of operation. Doors open to anyone seeking knowledge, opportunity, connection. Just as Eleanor Baker had once opened, doors for a hungry boy named Alex Reyes, who grew into Alexander Reed, who now stood beside Eleanor's granddaughter watching new possibilities unfold. Full circle, Lily had called it in her photo album. But perhaps it was more accurate to see it as a spiral, returning to similar themes but at a higher level, with greater resources to share, greater wisdom to offer, greater capacity to extend the legacy of compassion that had saved them both. Ready? To go back down? Lily asked after a comfortable silence. Emma wants everyone to taste the tomatoes from the greenhouse. Absolutely, Alexander said, following her toward the stairs. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As they descended into the vibrant heart of the community center, Alexander felt Eleanor's presence, not as a ghost but as a living influence, her values embedded in every corner of the building that bore her name, in every life touched by her enduring legacy of second chances and unconditional belief in human potential. Through the simple act of seeing a hungry child outside a restaurant window, truly seeing her as Eleanor had once seen him, Alexander